Hello, this is Bill and Sonja, and welcome to our review of Servant, Season 2, Episode 6, Espresso.
Hello, little flowers. For all you Uncle George fans out there. Stick around to the end of this video. We're going to do a little tribute to the great and, depending on who you think, crazy Uncle George.
Yeah. Well, this show begins with Sean getting his new Gaggia espresso machine and Dorothy tending to a 2-month-old Jericho.
Yeah, that was really the only reference to espresso. If anything, the show should have been called Caramel Macchiato. What do you think that scene meant?
I just think it shows them in simpler, better times. They seem relatively happy.
Yeah, I noticed in the background there was Brahms' Lullaby playing.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, and one of the lines from that song references Guardian Angel, so I wonder if that means anything. But last week's episode ended with Uncle George presumably there to get Leanne back, which is similar to when he came to get her in Season 1, Episode 6, Rain.
Yeah, except this time George rushes Julian while quoting scripture.
And Julian seems legitimately scared.
He does.
So there are theories that Julian and George have met in the past. This episode has a ton of biblical references. So the first one George says is from Deuteronomy. It's chapter 24, verse 14, which basically means that you shouldn't take advantage of, exploit, or oppress someone you've hired or is poor or in need, like Leanne and Tobit.
Yeah.
So.
Everything they're doing wrong.
Oh my goodness.
When George spits out the Deuteronomy line, Julian, in smart-ass mode, quotes some Guns N' Roses lyrics right back at him, which was probably everybody's favorite moment. I love George's look on his face at that, too. He was like just outraged. I was expecting him to shout out, "Thou shalt not mock me." But he just shouted out Leanne's name at the top of his lungs.
Right. Uncle George always looks like he's about to burst an artery.
He does.
So, but Julian was right with the lyrics. Every day it does get worse in the Turner house.
Welcome to the jungle.
Oh yeah, and apparently Dorothy is the only one that can yell in the house. She tells George not to yell in her house when all she does is run around yelling, "Sean, Sean."
I want to know why George's face is always dirty.
Probably because there's theories that he was resurrected. So it would make sense that he was dirty because he dug himself out of the grave.
Yeah, especially his nails. And he kind of led on to it, something we're going to talk about later too. So I think that's good. And while we're talking about resurrection, we were thinking about Roscoe. Maybe Roscoe was killed at the scene, like carjacking, I think someone had mentioned, and May and George were there to resurrect him. That's why he can't remember anything. Maybe he went to hell, and that scary story he told was from his
eyeballs.
Time in hell. Yeah, and then he was resurrected. So my theory from last week was confirmed. That Leanne sent the ransom note. Julian says it directly right before Dorothy goes upstairs, and we see Leanne kind of look up. This might be kind of weird, but this is the impression I got. I was almost under the impression she was like a lion waking up from a nap, a predator. She had icing from the king cake on her mouth that reminded me of blood. So
Dorothy commented when she looked at her. Dorothy commented about saying, "Looks like someone had quite a midnight snack." And Leanne, snaps back at her and says that she's lying about George.
Right, but she isn't.
No. I think Leanne meant she was lying about her having a successful ransom meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Because Leanne set that whole thing up, and she didn't come back with Jericho like she had planned.
Right.
So
okay.
Yeah.
What did you think about the lightning during that conversation? She seemed to get a little angry, and lightning flashed behind her.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was a coincidence or if it was the storm. So was it something supernatural, going on, or did Leanne cause it?
Seemed like it. Yeah.
There were those mannequins' reflections in the mirror. Do you think those had any meaning?
You know what? That might have just been a red herring from last week. Because we all thought something was going to happen with the mannequin, and this week all we see is its reflection in the mirror. And that was it.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories that the mannequin, they make maybe Leanne's going to resurrect the mannequin like she did Jericho and bring her mom back. Well, I don't know why she would do that, because she didn't like her mom. But anyway,
I don't know. We'll have to wait till next week and see if the mannequin pops up again or not.
This show's like a puzzle. So it also has includes scenes and dialogues that parallel season 1.
Yeah,
so
you mentioned that.
Yeah, I tried to say this scene is like another scene from another show. But the next scene, when Uncle George says festering, something rotten. This reminds me of when Aunt May said the air is still putrid. I could smell it the moment I walked in the door from episode 10.
Yeah. So. Yeah, maybe we're onto something. When Sean defends the smell, or George says something about the rotting smell, and Sean's like, "Hey, we're getting the pipes fixed." Uncle George, if you notice, is not at all surprised, and he's like, "Oh, it's the house, of course,"
So I wonder if Uncle George is referring to a literal curse on the house or the brownstone, or because he says she caused this.
Yeah, maybe, because George runs downstairs to the basement saying she caused this, and then talks about the crumbling foundation. I think it's a double meaning. Perhaps he's talking about Leanne's ruse and helping the Turners when she wasn't supposed to. Or maybe God's upset because she's not being submissive. She's not following the cult's rules, if it's a cult now.
If you ask Julian's opinion, no.
yeah. That took me a couple times to watch to catch that, but that was hilarious. Again, Julian being a smart ass, and George freaks out when he finds out that they've had Leanne there for a whole week. But instead of jumping on them, he begs God's forgiveness for the Turners. Dorothy yells, "Don't pray for me. You have nothing to be forgiven for." It was kind of funny.
Did you notice right at that moment, it starts to rain?
Yeah.
So again, is that supernatural? Is it a coincidence? Is it raining because of Uncle George's emotions? Their emotions seem to control a lot of things in this show.
Yeah.
But Dorothy has done many a deed that would warrant forgiveness. 1, the death of Jericho. 2, kidnapping, and attempted murder, just to name a few. So,
wow. In this scene, Dorothy, just out of frustration, mentioned she'd like to cut up and torture George. And it reminded me of M. Night Shyamalan's Ask Me Anything Reddit interview, where he mentioned if someone had his kids, he would cut them up into little pieces with no remorse.
Yeah. He's like, "I love you guys, but I'd cut you up."
Yeah.
So if you want to hear that clip or watch that interview, there's a link in the interview in the description.
Yeah. Okay, so Julian decides at this point he's going to kick George's ass, though he has zero chance of doing that, in my opinion. Lucky for him, when he challenges George to the fight, George refuses. He says, "I can't fight you, Julian." Julian says, "Yeah, but you can get punched," which is just, okay, Julian, whatever. I think George would annihilate Julian. Throughout this episode, they keep misunderstanding George. Everything he says, they don't really get it. And I think that parallels them not understanding the situation they're in.
Right, because he's like, "You're not frightened," so.
You're right.
Yeah, but while all this is taking place, Leanne, it's all taking place in Leanne's room, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's got that mural in the background.
The mysterious mural.
So, okay, I've done a lot of research on this mural, and here's what I've come up with.
Okay.
So the mural is an original drawing from an artist named Alex Nice.
Nice.
He's not so nice because he could be really nice. I really didn't expect him to reply, but I did reach out to him and ask him, hey,
maybe
what's
he's got
up
an
with
NDA
that?
and he can't.
Maybe, right? But he was asked to design an ominous mural using ominous mural using various events of classic paintings for the main character's room.
What a hard assignment that would have been to come up with that.
God, he is a great artist, though.
Yeah.
So I'm positive of 5 of the images.
Okay.
So the first one is a painting called Daniel in the Lion's Den.
Okay.
And it symbolizes the resurrection of Jesus from the dead.
Okay. I don't know how that symbolizes Jesus' resurrection, but it does.
Story, yeah. Something about him being in a lion's den and he was saved because he had faith.
All right, I get it.
Eaten.
I get it.
So
it kind of supports the theory that Leanne has powers of resurrection too, right?
Right. The second one is the white horse with the tree, and you see the trees and the birds. It's called, I'm going to really totally mispronounce this, Arche Noah. It's by Frederik Bouttats. I don't know. Please forgive me with this. The third one is named Piety. It's an Italian artist. His name is Cornelis Kruseman. And you see them in the middle of the painting.
With the woman and the girl?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And they're kind of like Italian peasants.
Okay.
The fourth is a Rembrandt painting. And it is called Tobit accusing Anna of stealing the kid. And this one reminds me...
Interesting name of that.
Right? Could be Toby.
Well, accusing of stealing the kid.
Yeah, accusing of stealing the kid, right?
Maybe.
But this one, it reminds me when Uncle George is praying for Dorothy and begging. He has his hands clutched.
Right.
And in the same exact way as in the painting.
Ah.
So the fifth is The Birth of Venus by Alexandre Cabanel. So I just thought it was interesting. If, please let us know in the comments if you know there's an old woman up like to the right.
Sitting down.
Yeah, sitting down the far right.
Yeah.
And then there's some little boys that are standing, and then there's a lake in the foreground. Let us know if you know where those paintings originated from.
Yeah, tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say too. Okay, so Sean is the level-headed one here. While Dorothy's wanting to cut George up, Sean says, no, let's speak his language. Let's make him believe that we believe what he's saying. But you know what? I think Sean kind of does believe what he's saying.
I do too. I think he totally believes him. He says he knows that she's special and that George is special too.
Right.
So.
And he and George have a reasonable conversation right here. George seems pretty empathetic, actually.
Mm-hmm. And during this whole time, Leanne has her ear to the floor. She's eavesdropping.
She's eavesdropping, yeah. Well, George blames Leanne for being cruel to the Turners, which kind of blew me away, by making them hope for something not possible.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I know Leanne's there to help, but maybe Dorothy would have remembered sooner if it was just the doll and there wasn't a real baby there. But earlier, Uncle George tells Julian, that baby, it should never have been here. It was a mistake, so... And then later tells Sean that they can only help people they were told to help. Wow, but Leanne disobeys and exercises free will all the time, which is similar to an earlier scene with Aunt May. And she says to Leanne, it's in episode 10, she says that God had a path for that woman.
Dorothy.
Meaning Dorothy. He wanted her to suffer, and you thought you knew better.
Ooh.
So.
Yeah, George also says she's been rebellious since she's been a child, and that is very frustrating for them.
Yeah, and he says it's worrisome. So George keeps telling Sean at this point that Sean knows exactly who they are.
Meaning the cult. Yeah. And all them.
Yeah. And Sean's like, no, I don't, but Sean almost says who he thinks they are, but he gets cut off. He did. So what do you think he was going to say?
I think he was going to say angels.
Right. Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe not.
Yeah. This would support the theory that Leanne is an angel for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So George says to Sean, we are amongst all of you. We are the ones that have been given a second chance at life.
That's what I was talking about earlier when he led on to him being resurrected.
Okay.
His second chance. That's when it kind of clicked for me. And I'm like, that's why he's dirty.
Yeah. And he says we use it to enact God's divine plan to help others.
Yeah. Okay. Also, George says then that he can heal Sean and undo what Leanne did to him. He was holding his hand.
But it sounded like in order to do that, Sean would have to take Leanne back to Marino's or wherever she's supposed to be and then pray for forgiveness first. This scene reminded me of when George asked Sean in episode 10, what does Sean need? What will poor broken Sean?
Yeah. At that point, George says that's the only way you can be reunited with him. Who does he mean by him? I'm sure Sean thinks he means Jericho, but does he mean God, which is referred to as him in the Bible a lot? Or their leader or something. I don't know.
When Leanne was listening, she seemed to get really upset at that part.
Yeah, she
When
jumped
she
up
heard it.
like she was shocked and upset. Then all of a sudden, George is Sean's best buddy and is going to make a salve for his hand.
Oh my God, what was that salve made of? There was like lard or some kind of dried material. It looked like dried garlic or ginger.
Something aromatic, yeah.
It looked like there was honey or peanut butter in it. And later on, there's a news clip about peanut butter. Peanut butter that might be giving you cancer. The news anchor Walter said that. And then Walter says, you can't even enjoy a good old fashioned P&J anymore. In the background, you hear it. It's funny.
That's funny.
And don't forget the main secret ingredient.
Oh,
spit.
Yeah.
By the look of George's teeth, it probably smelled awful.
Nasty. But I think that's an actual representation of the story in the Bible where Jesus used his spit to make a salve in the clay to heal the blind man.
Okay. All this is happening while Dorothy and Sean try to figure out what the heck George is talking about.
And Dorothy thinks it's all BS, while Sean seems to really start to believe in.
Yeah. Dorothy thinks they should actually find Aunt May. And she's flabbergasted with Sean, that Sean's talking about like divine interventions. But yeah, Dorothy, there are plagues going on in the house. There are boils. There are locusts. There are floods. They're currently happening right underneath your feet in your house.
Yeah. And I noticed Julian showing signs of dependence. Anything stressful happens, he goes straight for the liquor bottle. And I think that's what gave him the courage to try to fight George.
Julian's so funny. He tells Sean, your house isn't equipped for the number of prisoners it currently accommodates. And then Sean goes upstairs to have a conversation with Rapunzel. Because Julian referred to Leanne as Rapunzel. Leanne asked Sean, what did my uncle say about me?
Which is funny because she knew exactly. She heard.
Yeah. Sean played it off and asked if she disobeyed her aunt and her uncle when she came to work for them.
Yeah, Leanne shook her head yes. But when Sean kind of assumed that she came to help, he's like, oh, you came to help us. She didn't acknowledge that. So maybe she didn't really come to help. What does that mean?
Well, she did say that at this point that she didn't think Jericho would be able to come home now.
Yeah, you're right. She did. But Sean refused to accept that. And he kept saying, well, maybe he can. Mm-hmm. So while Sean is taking the soft approach with them, Dorothy gets aggressive and tries to bribe George with the money again.
I love when George said, never interrupt a man in prayer. So
he takes some nerve.
Yeah, he takes that bag of money. He dumps the cash in the muddy hole. Dorothy is just so condescending in this scene. She calls George impossible. And George simply just, quotes another Bible verse. This one was Proverbs 11, which basically states, he who puts faith in wealth will come to nothing. And this episode focuses a lot on how important money is to Dorothy and Julian. Like in the beginning when Dorothy tells Sean to be firm with George and watch
the money. God, how arrogant. So Dorothy wants to know how George calls himself righteous when she kidnapped her son. Meanwhile, Sean gets Julian to distract Dorothy so he can let Leanne go or take her to her assignment.
Yeah, he asked her to pray with him and says, you must surrender, Dorothy. Dorothy was not having it. And it's funny, she didn't even ask, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
I was hoping he would tell her.
Julian goes down to the basement and sees George trying to hold Dorothy's hands and knocks him over protectively. Just like when Julian walked in on George and Sean in the basement in episode 10.
Yeah, right.
So.
Julian then notices the cash in the hole, gets outraged by that, starts pulling money back out while George just mocks him.
Yeah, George, what do you say? He says, you weep for your filthy cash. Weep for what you've done,
I'd weep for it too.
Yeah, I noticed I love the cinematography in the show. It's awesome, all the close-ups. And in the 2 a.m. episode, they showed them a lot of reflections. You could see Sean's reflection in the glass of wine at the dinner table. You could see the reflections in the table. So George is right. Really, they just need to take a good look at themselves, like Michael Jackson's song. So, but Leanne agrees to go with Sean, right?
Yeah.
But only agrees if she'll go if he takes her far away from the cult.
Yes. So initially he lies saying yes, but she calls him out right on it. She knows he's lying.
Yeah, she knew it was lying, and this triggered a flashback, right? Of Sean agreeing to be the host of that Gauntlet cooking show.
Yeah.
And he lied about his availability.
I guess he did.
At that point.
Yeah.
So
is that the lie that he harbors so much guilt from, maybe?
I think so, because I know that he blames himself for Jericho's death, because he feels like if he wouldn't have left for that weekend, Jericho would still have been alive.
Yeah.
I still don't think it was his fault, though.
No,
but
I don't.
I definitely think he blames himself.
Yeah, you got to work. But the Gaggia scene was the center of that as well, or the Gaggia machine was the center of that scene. And I'm not sure what it signified, though. Like, what did it mean?
Other than he told Leanne in season 1, it was not to be touched. I don't know. But
maybe
in this
decadence
scene,
or something?
Maybe. Has anyone noticed how Dorothy holds Jericho and when she waves his little hand? Anywho, Sean comes out of his memory and really agrees to take Leanne away. As they're leaving, they see on the TV the news report of a shooting at the Marino house. That's where Leanne was.
Yeah.
Where she was assigned to.
Yep.
So. And
then back in the basement, George tells Dorothy that she needs to own up to what she's done. I thought he was going to drop it on her there, but he didn't.
But I think Dorothy thinks she's talking about Leanne.
Yeah.
What she did to Leanne. And says, I didn't do anything to her. I didn't do anything to her she didn't deserve. George has no idea really even what she's done to Leanne. Yeah.
But then she basically admits to burying Leanne, and George just freaks out, saying she'll never get Jericho back now.
And then George does another Bible quote, this one from James chapter 2. The verse talks about James recognizing that the human tendency is to dismiss our sins, but he's not going to let us off the hook, whatever that means.
Yeah, I don't really understand what that means, to dismiss our sins. In other words, if it's just to deny what we did, like Dorothy's doing, maybe that was it. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, at that point, roaches start springing up from the hole. Is that response to George's anger, maybe?
Or maybe it's showing his disgust about the money, or maybe a sign that there's a plague in the house. I don't know. Meanwhile, Dorothy and Julian run up the stairs, or run away from the roaches.
Yeah.
And George, shortly after follows them up, and he sees the news report and says, "What have you done?" I'm not an actress, but something like that.
What makes me wonder about that, though, is if the man sleeping in the chair in the old lady's room at the Marino Manor where all the kids were, if he was dead. He wasn't asleep in that chair. He was dead.
Or was he the father and he went nuts and killed everybody? I don't know. This show's bizarre. 1 minute we're feeling sorry for them. Next time I'm mad at them, and we're terrified, and we're feeling, anxious, and then we're laughing. That's something Julian said. So I don't know. Right. But I read a comment on Reddit that said Dorothy and Sean are going to have to prepare a crib
there's
for
some smart
George
people on
to
Reddit.
Sleep in while he's there visiting. Yeah, they're so witty. Well, like I said in the beginning of the video, here's the tribute to Uncle George. He deserves it after his performance in this episode. So let us pray.
Yes.
Abun de Boashemaya, Nes Kadashmach, Tetemalkurach, Never Sevino Chakana de Boashemaya of Barha, Hovla Nachma, Sunkanan Yaumana, Washbuklen Kaubein, Wachtehin, I cannot Dafglan Spur Kanel Kairbein, Will I Tolan Eldeshina, Ella Patsamin Bisha, Metol de la Kai Wachela, Wateshbuk Tala Lam Almin. Amen.
Amen. Bring on, I'm ready for next week. Bring on some more weirdness, servant. We're having so much fun, trying to figure out all the mysteries inside mysteries. I also included a link about Michael Goulakis, I think Goulakis or Joulakis. He did the cinematography in season 1 of Servant, and he did the first 2 episodes of season 2. But he talks about the challenges they face of shooting Servant in one location. So thanks for watching.
Hey, if you like this video, as usual, give us a like and please subscribe. We really appreciate all the views and especially the comments. Till next week, bye.
Bye.